Let's talk about worship song arrangements and specifically the worship song arrangement roadmap so that you can make something like this so that you can communicate to your worship team in a way that actually makes sense so that your worship team stops just playing full blast nonstop from the intro all the way to chorus number 3 and you actually have some dynamics in your song. So let's talk a little bit about worship song arrangements. Here's what we have to understand whenever it comes to worship song arrangements, all right? The simple rule is this: every single part of your worship song, if you want to arrange it well, should be different. It should sound different. And I know that that's not normal for us because whenever we look, if we're an acoustic guitar player, for example, we look at verse number 1 and we look at verse number 2 and we think, oh, well, they have the same chords, right? Like it's G, C, D, E minor, classic worship song chord progression. And therefore, I must be playing the same thing when I play this song. Well, no. You shouldn't be. You should be playing a different way between verse 1 and verse 2, even though you're playing the same chords. And that is how you get dynamics in your worship songs. But we need to extend that if we are the worship team leader and we're thinking musically about the songs that we're leading and we want to arrange them well. We have to apply that understanding not just to our own playing, but to our entire worship team. And hopefully all of our worship team members, the drummer and the bass player and the pianist and the other guitar player and the harmony singers are all having that same mindset as well, where they are figuring out what to do differently between each part of the song. And so the worship song arrangement roadmap is how I, in my mind, articulate this to my team. And there's actually a subset of this underlying this, which I will break this down in a second, but underlying this, you see guitar, keys, vocalists, so on and so forth. Actually, if we wanted to break this down more, each of these individual parts would have their own form of this and a more specific understanding of what they're doing. But in this video, we're going to be talking about how to communicate with your entire band about what they should be playing and when. So, like I said, here's the worship song arrangement roadmap. You know how I know it's the roadmap? Because it says right here. That's why I wrote it at the bottom. But let's start off, and I'll just show you kind of what I do as I work through this, but I'll put it on the screen on one of these sides. I'm not sure which side yet. Let's just talk about, let's use the song Build My Life, for example, and I will show you this process of a worship song arrangement roadmap in practice. So for this, we are essentially what we're doing is we're just charting out where each instrument or vocalist comes in or cuts out in our song. And so let's take a look at the song Build My Life. What do we need to do? First, we need to write the title so we know what song we're on, right? So Build My Life, boom, right there, easiest part of the process. Now we need to think, what instruments do I have on my worship team? And we're gonna list all of those out because those are the pieces that we're gonna plug in to each part of this roadmap. Let's say, for instance, you have one acoustic guitarist, you have another acoustic guitarist, you have one vocalist, you have vocalist number 2 who probably sings harmony. Let's say you don't even have a drum set, you just have a cajon player.
This is a cajon if you don't know what a cajon is.
You've got a bass player and you've got keys and then you have the pad behind you, which is that ethereal synth sound that I always talk about. So we have 8 pieces to work with, 8 pieces of the worship song arrangement puzzle. So that's how we start. We got to figure out what pieces we have to work with. Now we need to chart out the structure of the song. So for Build My Life, we start with the intro and then we go into verse 1 and then we have chorus 1, and then we go to verse 2, chorus 2, then we have a bridge, and then we have chorus 3, another bridge, and maybe repeat the chorus one time at the end. So now we have the structure of our songs. We're going to take those different pieces, the instrumentalists in our band, and plug them into each section of the song, keeping the dynamics of the song in mind. Actually, let's go a step further here and just talk about the dynamics that we want for each part of the song. I think that this is something that I take for granted because it's just like a step that I know the dynamics of the song, but I think that it's helpful to chart this out before we figure out how we're going to achieve those dynamics. So verse number 1, in this song, we want it to be quiet. And all I do for this is like quiet, medium, and loud, essentially. We don't have to complicate it. We don't have to like come up with 45 different ways to talk about dynamics. Quiet, medium, and loud. So verse 1, quiet. Chorus 1, quiet. Verse 2, medium, or sometimes I call this like driving, because usually medium is like where the bass and the drums kicks in. You'll see that in a second. Chorus 2 is loud. The bridge is quiet, and then it builds up to a climax of loud. Chorus number 3, as loud as we can get. The bridge, just as loud as chorus number 3, and then we'll repeat it one time at the end quietly. So I will chart out the dynamics like that. I usually just do that subconsciously in my head, but if this is your first time, it might be helpful to chart it out. Now we need to ask ourselves the question, how are we going to make each of these parts different and achieve those dynamics that we need? So we know all of the puzzle pieces that we have to fit into our worship song arrangement. Let's start putting some puzzle pieces together. So verse number 1 is quiet. What do we want? Well, we could have guitar number 1 playing there with the pad in the background, because the pad's going to play behind us the entire song. So we'll have the pad as the foundation. The guitar number 1 will come in, and with like some light keyboard, and then the vocals, vocal number 1. That is like the lead vocalist who's singing the lead melody of the song. Chorus number 1, we're going to make things a little bit differently. And what if we had the keys cut out there? And so now we just have the guitar, we have the pad in the background. We could have like just a little bit of bass maybe, and see what that sounds like, and like that'll kind of substitute. Maybe the keyboard at the beginning was providing some low end in verse number 1, and now we just switch that feeling of the low end to the bass just playing whole notes, and then we have the lead vocalist as well. Now, verse number 2 kicks in. What do we want to happen here? We're going medium. We're building, like the beat finally kicks in to verse number 2. So we've got guitar 1, we've got vocals 1, we've got guitar 2 now playing something different than what guitar 1 is playing. We've got our second vocalist singing some harmonies maybe, and then we have the rhythm section come in, bass and cajon. They're providing the beat, and so now verse 2, we've got that medium volume, that driving tempo. Chorus 2, we're all in, but we're doing this like loud, but not as loud as we get. So we can tell that to our team, like, we're gonna be loud here, but remember, chorus 3 is coming. And so whenever we get to chorus 3, we need that to be different than chorus number 2. So we want it to be all in on chorus 3, which means that we can't be all in on chorus number 2, or else we won't have anywhere to go. So where all of the instruments are in playing their parts, but we're still keeping it not as loud as it'll get, but still a little bit louder than verse number 2. From there, we go to the bridge. What do? Well, we want it to drop out there, right? As any classic worship song does, we drop back so that we can build it up dynamically. So to do that, we're going to cut out some of the instruments. And now we've just got the guitar, and we've got the pad, and we've got the keyboard, and we've got vocal number 1. And we sing through the bridge one time. And then from there, we're going to repeat the bridge again, but now we want to hit it a little bit harder, and the bass and the cajon comes in, and we get a little bit of harmony coming in, and then we go through the bridge one more time, or maybe like the second half of that second time, and guitar number 2 comes in with like a higher part up on the guitar neck, and now we are like reaching peak loudness, driving it to chorus number 3. All of the instruments are in, building together, and then on chorus number 3, boom, we're all in. We're as loud as we can get. This is the climax of the song. Every instrument is playing. All you have to do is say all in, loud. And that will define what people do during this part of the song. We finish up with the bridge. We're all in. We push through chorus 3 to bridge number 2, repeating the bridge and making it as loud as possible. And then at the end, we cut out back to guitar 1, vocalist 1, pad, and the keys. Or maybe even if you wanted to make it really bare, like just the keys and vocalist 1 and the pad in the background. So I just talked through this. But what do we do with this? Well, this helps us chart out in our own mind the dynamics of the song, and so that we can communicate this to our team and let people know when they should be coming in, and not just that they're coming in from the beginning and being in there the entire song. That is like my biggest pet peeve when I hear bands do that. They've got like this amazing amount of musicians. They have like 8 musicians on their team, and they all play at full volume the entire time. This is how you overcome that. So what do we do with this? Well, you can give this to your team. And if you've never done this before, and your team is literally just playing from top to bottom as loud as they can, and your dynamics are struggling, pick a song that your team is familiar with and tell them at a worship rehearsal, hey, I want to work on the dynamics of our team. And so I think the way we can do that is we're going to take Build My Life, and I want to talk through the arrangement that we're going to do. And I know we've done this song a million times and you have a specific way of playing it. Let's just try something different. This will keep it feeling fresh and exciting for us as we play it, and I think it'll also sound a little bit better. So you type up something like this and you hand it to your team members and say, I want you to find your instrument on there. You are on there somewhere, and that's where you're going to come in, and that's where you're going to cut out. So take note of where you're coming in and where you're cutting out. Bass and drummer, I know you're not in there until verse 2. Guess what that means? That means you sit out for the first half of the song. That doesn't mean that we don't value your position, but you will make a bigger impact when you don't play. You'll make a bigger impact when you finally come in. So that's what we're trying to replicate here. And just talk your team through what I just talked about, that worship song arrangement roadmap. And I think that that is going to help your team with dynamics if they have never even thought about that before. Actually tell them when to play. Now, what to play in their specific part, that's kind of up to them, and they will figure that out. But it starts here with the foundation of just teaching them that they don't have to play every part of the song, and they don't have to play at full blast every part of the song. This is like a stepping stone into a deeper conversation of what your team members should be playing so that you produce your songs well and that there's room in the arrangement for dynamics. Now, when do you go through that exercise with your worship team? Well, I think the best time to do it is during your worship rehearsal. And I want to give you a plan for your worship rehearsal that will help you lead your team well spiritually, relationally, and musically. And I've linked it down in the description below. It's a free PDF called the Worship Rehearsal Blueprint. In that, I will give you a step-by-step plan to make sure that your team is led well every single week and you have time to work on this. So check that out down in the description below. If you want to lead your team well at your next worship rehearsal, you've got to have a plan. Other than that, thanks so much for joining me. Until I see you in the next video, keep leading worship well.